analysis by UPSC IAS. The list of articles that we are going to discuss are displayed here. If you can notice, we have covered 3 articles from yesterday's newspaper and 4 articles from today's newspaper. The topic we have chosen are very relevant for our examination, so please watch till the end of the video. Before getting into the discussion, I have an important announcement that please do subscribe to our channel for more updates. So hit the bell icon so that you can get the notification. Let's get into the discussion. Take a look at this article from yesterday's newspaper. This article is about a new concept called Atlantification. The article explains how Atlantification affects the sea waters of Arctic Ocean. So in this discussion we will understand the concept of Atlantification in detail. Atlantification refers to the influence of Atlantic warm waters over the different Arctic seasons. As we all know, over the past years, the Arctic seas is disappearing. It is due to many factors like global warming, climate change, and so on. But recently, the scientist also says that the warmer and saltier waters from Atlantic oceans are also responsible for the melting of Arctic sea ice. Now, what causes the Atlantic Ocean waters to move towards the Arctic Ocean? It is primarily due to changes in the Arctic dipole. Here the Arctic dipole is nothing but the pressure patterns that exist over the Arctic Ocean since 2007. The Arctic region has been under influence of the positive Arctic dipole. To have a lot of understanding, take a look at this image. The positive dipole is characterized by high pressure over the Canadian sector of Arctic and low pressure over the Siberian sector of the Arctic. During the positive Arctic dipole, the Canadian sector produces the clockwise winds and the Siberian sector produces the counterclockwise or anti-clockwise winds. This change in wind pattern drives the upper ocean currents from one place to another. See, the washing currents usually move from low pressure areas to high pressure areas during a positive Arctic dipole. There is a relative low pressure in the Siberian sector, so the ocean currents tends to move from Siberian sector to Canadian sector. That is, the water moves in the westward direction. This in turn helps the warmer water of the Siberian sector to move towards the Canadian sector. Since there is a high pressure over the Canadian sector, the warmer waters have lesser impact on the melting of the ice. Okay, this happens during positive Arctic dipole. Since 2007, the positive Arctic dipole favored the westward movement of fresh water, and it helped to slow the overall loss of the CAS in Arctic. As a result, the depth of the freshwater ice has increased along the Arctic. Also, the ice was too thick and stable. See, there is another warm motion current that comes from the Atlantic Ocean. It flows into the bottom of the Arctic Ocean through the from strait. Despite it being very warm, the already existing thick layer of fresh water prevents the warm saltier water of the Atlantic Ocean from melting the Arctic CAS from the bottom. But there is a problem. The scientists are saying that there might be a reversal in the Arctic dipole from positive to negative dipole. See, the reversal in the dipole is a normal phenomena, and it is said that Arctic dipole reverses once every 15 years. If the Arctic dipole gets reversed, it increases the Atlantification effect. This means the warmer, saltier water of the Atlantic Ocean will exaggerate the melting of the Arctic ice. This is because during a negative dipole, the low pressure area is experienced towards the Canadian sector of the Arctic Ocean. The high pressure area is experienced in the Siberian sector. So the wash and water moves from Canadian sector to Siberian sector. That is, the water moves in the eastward direction. Already there exists the warm water in the Siberian sector, so the westward movement of the water could increase the temperature and affects the ice formation in the Arctic Ocean. In this situation, the warmer and the saltier Atlantic waters exaggerate the melting of the Arctic seas. So, the negative Arctic dipole condition favors the Atlantic warm waters to influence the Arctic waters. This is how about Atlantification. See, UPSC picks words like this and they can ask it in the preliminary examination. So just to go through the points we discussed about Atlantification in this discussion. It will be greatly helpful for your prelims examination. Now with this, let us conclude this discussion and take up the next news article. Take a look at this news article from yesterday's newspaper. The news article talks about one nation, one election. Recently, Union Law Ministry formed the One Nation, One Election Committee, and yesterday the ministry named 8 members who will be part of the committee. The committee will be headed by the former President Ramnath Kovind, and the name of the other members were displayed here. You can go through it. The main purpose of this committee is to examine the issues of simultaneous elections to Lok Sabha Assembly, municipality and panchayats, and it will suggest specific amendments to the constitution and their representation of People's Act. It will also make recommendations on whether the amendments to the constitution would require a ratification by the states or not, and the committee will examine the scenarios that might lead to the election. For example, events like hung house, adoption of no confidence motion, defection, etc. It will also try to answer solution for these scenarios. So the committee will be holding a huge responsibility, but the Congress leader in the Lok Sabha, Mr. Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary, whose name was in the list of members of the committee, declined to be on the committee. This is about the news article. Given here in this context, let us try to understand what is One Nation, One Election, why it is needed, and what are the hurdles in implementing it before getting into the discussion. I have highlighted the syllabus regarding this discussion. Now you can go through it, and let's start first. Let us try to understand what is One Nation, One Election. As we all know, currently in India, the general elections to elect the members of the parliament and the state assembly are held separately, but the concept of One Nation, One Election envisions to conduct the simultaneous polls across the country. This means that the election to Lok Sabha and all the state assemblies will be conducted at the same time. This concept is not something new to Indian democracy, because One Nation, One Election was the norm in India till 1967. Simultaneous elections were conducted for Lok Sabha and the state assemblies in 1952. 1957, 1962 and 1967. However, due to the premature dissolution of some legislative assemblies in 1968 and 1969, the simultaneous election cycle got disrupted. Further, in 1970, the Lok Sabha was dissolved prematurely and the fresh elections were held in 1971. All these events lead to the breakdown of cycle of simultaneous elections in India. Many attempts were made to revive the practice. For example, in 1982, the Election Commission itself put forward a suggestion to bring an amendment so that One Nation, One Election can again be held simultaneously. The suggestion did not fructify them. Then in May 1999, the Law Commission headed Justice B.P. Jeevan Reddy in its own 70th report stated that the cycle of election every year would be put to an end. Unholding and separate direction to a Lok Sabha should be an exception rather than the route. Later, the Standing Committee on Personal Public Events, Law and Justice submitted its report on feasibility of holding simultaneous elections to the houses of the people and the state legislative assembly in December 2017. Following this, the government asked the Election Commission whether One Nation, One Election was possible. The Election Commission replied that it is possible only if amendments were made. Amendments were made to the constitution and the representation of People's Act without amendments. The Election Commission is bound by the law to hold election as an when the polls are due in the states. So currently it is in the hands of government to make those amendments to the parliament. by gathering support of all the political parties. In that line, only government's recent step of forming the UN Nation Election Committee, a right movement this is about the various steps taken by the government to implement one nation one election. Now we will see what are the reasons or what are the necessities of having one nation one election. Firstly, joint polls will help save money, time and energy. See, according to some reports, a amount of rupees 60,000 crore was used at time of Lok Sabha election in 2019. Imagine such kind of huge expenses happening every year to conduct election. Separately for state assemblies, apart from saving money, it also saves time and energy by reducing the burden of the administrative setups. And the security forces, this will ensure timely implementation of government policies and ensure that the administrative machinery is engaged in development activities rather than being in the election mode. Secondly, the election held simultaneously could potentially result in the higher vote turnout than usual rationale behind. This is a casting vote may be more comfortable for the voters when these elections are conducted together. Thirdly, one nation, one election will bring an end to populist policies by the political parties. It is commonly observed that in order to obtain short-term political advantage, the ruling politicians postpone making difficult decisions which will eventually benefit the country in long run. One nation, one election will address these issues as it will address the issues of political parties always being in the election mode. One nation, one election will also bring consistency and the continuity in the policies and programs of the central governments and the states. These are some of the reasons for why India needs a one nation, one election. Okay. Now we will see the challenges in implementing one nation and one election policy. See, the first biggest challenge is to think the terms of various state legislative assemblies with that of Lok Sabha. For instance, the term of present Lok Sabha will go up to 2024, but the elections to some of the legislative assemblies had already taken place last year. For example, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan are some are due to this year. For example, Haryana, Maharashtra, Jharkhand. This results in different dates of completion of the term. So bringing a sync to all the states and bringing a sync between the states and center will be a huge task. This is the first hurdle. Secondly, there is also no clarity on dealing with the situations like midterm polls or president's rule in case any party fails to get a majority either in the state or in the center. Apart from this, regional political parties argue that having two elections simultaneously would hamper their prospects because they won't be able to highlight the local issues prominently. Consequently, the regional issues might get overshadowed by the national issues. They also fear that they could not compete with the national parties in terms of money and the election strategies. Finally, striking an agreement among all the political parties remains a significant hurdle. The process might be time consuming, and if in the case the BJP government loses in 2024 Lok Sabha elections, no one can assure the talks. No one nation, one election will come into implementation. These are some of the hurdles faced in the implementation of one nation, one election. All we can do is wait till one nation, one election committee makes a recommendation regarding this. So that's all regarding this discussion. In this discussion, we saw what is one nation, one election. We saw the steps taken by government and various recommendations given by this election commission and the law commission. We also saw the needs for one nation, one election. Finally, the hurdles in implementing one nation, one election. With this, let us conclude this discussion. Take up the news article. Look at this news article. Here tomorrow by-elections are going to held in 7 assembly constituencies that spread over 6 states such as West Bengal, Uttarakhand, Kerala, Uttar Pradesh, Tripura, Jharkhand, and the election campaign in 7 assembly constituencies came to an end yesterday. The news articles further states that the counting of the will take place on September 8th, and this is all about the news article. In this discussion, we will see the points about by-election. By-election refer to the election that is usually held to fill the vacant seats in the legislative bodies like parliament or state legislature. Here the vacancy may be cast due to several reasons like death, resignation, disqualification or expulsion of the sitting MPs or MLAs. So basically MLAs, basically by-elections are conducted to fill the vacancies in the legislative bodies. Now coming to the objectives of the by-election, the main objective of the by-election is to ensure the timely filling up of vacancies in the legislative body. See, if the particular constituencies seats become vacant, then there is no representation for such constituencies in this legislative body. This means that people living in such a constituency aren't able to register their problems and the needs in the parliament or the state legislature, so it is necessary to fill the vacant seats as soon as possible. So the election commission conducts the by-election to fill the vacant seats. This in turn provides continuous representation of the constituencies, the legislative bodies. Now we will see what is the time frame to conduct by-elections in India. See, the time limit is provided in section 151A of the Representation of People Act 1951. As per this section A, by-election for filling the vacant seats shall be held within a period of 6 months from the date of occurrence of vacancy. For example, if a vacancy occurs or arises January 1st, 2024, a by-election should be conducted. Within June 30, 2024, as the section contains the word shall, it is mandatory for the election commission to conduct by-election